Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our reading of Sacred and Terrible Air by Robert Kurvitz, translated by Group Ibex. We're going to jump back into it with Chapter 16 today. 16. ENTROPONAUT. 6 years earlier, and far away, somewhere on the edge of a different isla altogether, a man wakes up. The year is 72. He's all alone. It's cold in his tarpaulin tent, and the morning is dark. Curled up in his sleeping bag, he rubs his sides to get warm. His wool sweater, worn thin, scratches against his skin. It gets the blood flowing, and the man finally dares to stick his hand out of the warmth of his sleeping bag. He wears woolen, fingerless gloves, even when he sleeps. It's a common trick in his profession. He rummages around on the floor, finds his flashlight in the dark, and fiddles with the frozen switch for half a minute. Finally, the light bulb flickers on. The electric light is so crummy that it barely illuminates the one-man tent. The man sits up cross-legged in his sleeping bag and breathes on his fingers to warm his hands, his toothless mouth quivering. In the flashlight beam, on the inside of the tent, there is a stamp bearing the name of the manufacturer, Cooperative Microcosmos. The man puts his hand against the tarpaulin. It's cold, and the insulated tent has sunk in under the weight of the snow. Not the slightest bit of light seeps in from outside, and he doesn't even hear the whistling of the wind. The storm had died down during the night. An electric wristwatch shows that today is his birthday. He's 39 years old. It's 7:15 in the morning. The man climbs out of his sleeping bag and, crouching in the microcosmos tent, pulls his anorak coat on over his sweater and slips his feet into lace-up boots. The zipper squeaks open, and just like that, legs bare, he steps out of the tent and straight into the pale. 20 kilometers past the edge of the world, it's snowing quietly. In the dim morning light, the wreck of a man limps a few steps away from his snow-covered tent to stand beneath a bare tree. All around him, from the black and white dream of the taiga landscape, the fanged mountain sides and the ghostly frills of koshot spruce trees emerge. Through the snow and fog, a faint blue seeps into the colorless world, where the radius of visibility ends. It's morning. It doesn't get any brighter here. And in the middle of it, opposite the gnarled tree, stands a completely destroyed human being. He is an Entroponaut. He's an aging rocker. His name is Sigismund Berg. He wears dark blue boxers with a white hem, and he's taking a piss. The camp is located on a hillside terrace surrounded by spruce trees. Even in the misty distance of the valley below, the clattering echoes of a snow shovel can be heard as the Entroponaut digs out the front of his tent, and then the repeated kerchunks of an axe. Sigismund Berg comes back to the tent across the clearing with a handful of branches from the barren tree. Thick snowflakes drift in the air. The man had pulled on what's left of a pair of worn-down jeans, and, while he was working, he had unbuttoned his anorak coat and put his hood back on his shoulders. Now he stands still. Just like that. Something had moved in the pale, right in front of him. Silence. It is this silence from which all other silences are derived. The Entroponaut inhales sharply. The sound of his breathing, the roar of blood in his ears, is so loud here that it interferes with his hearing. The kindling shifts in his lap. He stands motionless, his back slightly hunched as always. Even the snowfall stops, and the pail stands still with him. Minutes pass. The counter on his electronic wristwatch freezes at 7:48. There is a sound of hooves stepping on the granite. Right in front of him, on a rock on higher ground, an ibex steps out of the pale. Sigismund stares at him intently, and the ibex looks back at Sigismund. They both have dark eyes, moist from the cold. Sigismundberg has a receding hairline and the ponytail of an aging rocker, and the alpha male has a huge crown of horns. In the pale behind the animal, his herd glides along and pushes uphill, colorless silhouettes, straight legs flexing on their hooves. The horns of the Kozorogs are wrapped in the pale like the spearheads of a passing army. Puffs of steam rise from the kids' snorting nostrils. They go alongside the females, and the king himself goes last. The ibex sways his crown of horns side to side and recedes into the pale. He leaves the Entroponaut standing there alone. "Don't go," says Sigismund, in his pitiful drunkard voice. "Please, don't go." He drops the kindling and clambers up the snowy stone wall. His fingerless gloves slide off the granite. His feet can't find a foothold. Panting, he stumbles through the pale, among the dwarf spruces. There's nothing there anymore. Everyone's gone. What are you still looking for up here, you bozo? "Don't go. Please don't go. You're like that old man. You know, the one who goes to the park to spend time with the squirrels. Little Mickey, come here, Mickey. The need for closeness is just so deadly. He can't manage." "But I'm so alone." "You are never alone, Ziggy. You have yourself." 21 years ago, on an evening during winter break, Ziggy stands at the horse-car stop. In 2 days, the 51st year will become the 52nd. The Vossen suburb sleeps around him. It's already late, and it's dark outside. But he's not in a hurry to be anywhere. His mother isn't expecting him home. The boy weaves back and forth on the tram stop's wooden bench, the zippers jingling on his leather jacket. His backdrop, the high picket fence of the plot by the road, is a permanent reminder of private property. It pisses him off. He had just come back from selling gear to rich kids, and shortly before that, he had performed his famous Sprechgesang at the winter solstice party. The elementary school guys guffawed. They totally loved it. Some of the high school folks looked at him like, "What an idiot. No way this guy will live to be 20. But Ziggy isn't interested in those high schoolers anyway. They're established little wankers, as Ziggy affectionately calls them. They alone still have hope. Ziggy is also drunk, and he's definitely ready to look for some trouble. But there's no one at the Falu stop at this hour of the day, so an inanimate object will have to do. Watch him challenge the public transport timetable. But the timetable is a pushover. Frustrated by its lack of aggressiveness, the boy tries to pry it off of its post, but the metal sheet just bends from his effort. And since Ziggy is the craziest freak in Elysium, the one who steals public transport timetables so others won't know if the last tram has already gone by or not, he crumples up the sheet with the necessary information and throws it away. The stop is still empty, and Ziggy is still in the mood to rumble, so the trash bin's Weltanschauung is no longer acceptable to him. "What did you say?" Ziggy pushes the repulsive trash bin with both hands, but it's too full and pleased with itself to stand up for its honor. "I heard what you said just now. Raving lunatic, so full of yourself. He dares to raise a hand against private property. You think you're a super cool dude, right? Lunatic, dares to raise a hand. What's wrong with arguing? We're all educated people. But you know what?" The trash bin has no clue what Ziggy is talking about. It has a snow hat on its head, studded with extinguished cigarette butts, that's all. Wouldn't it still be possible to reach a peaceful settlement? "You would like that, wouldn't you? Huh? You'd like that, yeah? Kiss my ass, bourgeois." Ziggy kicks a dent in the trash bin and almost loses his balance. With the waste container completely humiliated, this stumbling force of nature turns his attention to the tram stop sign. It flutters in the wind, with Falu written on it. The sign starts spinning like a water wheel when Ziggy jump kicks it. But when he lands, he slips and slams down on his back. A cloud of snow rises into the air, and for a moment Ziggy lies there, powder snow falling on his face, and laughs. The streetlights shine above him in the dark blue winter night sky, and snowflakes drift by. Somewhere way up there in the invisible blackness, forgotten communication satellites from a bygone era glide along their orbits. Everything goes around so sweetly, a beautiful, dark, dizzy world under attack. But Ziggy hasn't partied enough yet. He pulls himself up. Since he dismantled the timetable, he now has no idea whether the last tram has already gone by or not. Fortunately, the young man is still in the mood to change the world, and so we see him proceeding on foot, at the knees of his jeans white with snow, his leather jacket open in the front, and his pop-idle hair blowing in the wind. He goes along the streets of the suburb, heading towards home, and on both sides of the road, behind the picket fences, wooden houses are sleeping. He casts disdainful glances at them. Coziness is bourgeois. He's looking for the right one, the sweetest one of them all. He has a brick in his hand. He has a pimple on his forehead. Carl Lund, the young paper industrialist, reads a newspaper in the living room downstairs. In the header of the newspaper, there's a silhouette of a centaur with a top hat, and grand serif typeface lettering that reads, Capitalist. This isn't the journal of a self-proclaimed speculator. It's a newspaper that was started 500 years ago, in the dawn of the market economy, one of the oldest in the world. No get-rich-quick tricks are published here. In Capitalist, all political reality is considered through an economic lens. It's seen the way it actually is, on the flip side of the wishful dreams from the beginning of the century. Carl Lund is concerned about the world, so he reads in order to understand, and he understands in order to help. Genuinely, you could read it yourself, with pleasure, and you would be a more influential person for it. But unfortunately, you don't understand Capitalist. Ziggy doesn't either. He's tried, but he still doesn't. He didn't try very hard. Crop failure in Yisut, the Zarath epidemic in Sara Mariza. These things don't concern Ziggy. He doesn't feel moved by them. To him, these are just reproaches, negativity. Ziggy isn't worried about the world. He doesn't want to understand or to help. He wants something completely different. And in just a moment, he's going to show you what it is. The boy tightens the laces of his sneakers. He doesn't feel cold thanks to his intoxication. He stands at the gate of a white wooden house with a brick in his hand and winds up. The brick flies from his throwing hand. Ziggy has a beastly grin on his face. The lump of stone catapults further into the darkness of the winter night, and at the receiving end, waiting to be destroyed, is a caricature of life, which is what a person living a slightly more normal life is to the young Sigismund Berg. Leather-bound books, the smell of mahogany. The window shatters into 1,000 little pieces, and the paper industrialist jumps up from his armchair. Upstairs, like a bad omen, dark green eyes fly open. "I can't wait any longer," yells Ziggy, his elbows at his side and his back arched from the strain. "End, world, end." Saliva and puffs of steam fly from his mouth. It's a breath of flame, reeking of vodka. He's a dragon. Carl Lund is still a young man in 51, in his mid-30s. He flies to the front door like a bullet from a gun and puts on his sports shoes there. For the past month, he's been finding garbage bags with the word bourgeois in his garden. Every morning, the place is littered with rubbish, filthy cans hanging from the quince bushes. He storms out, throws open the garden gates, and stops for a moment. Barely 50 meters away, in the middle of the street, a figure in a black leather jacket is running for his life. The paper industrialist takes off from where he's standing and rushes after the boy. Ziggy's black pop star hair flutters in the wind, wavy and a little greasy too. The icy halos of the lanterns behind him contract and unravel into auras as Ziggy whizzes past. Snow flies from under his sneakers. His open jacket flutters in the wind. Fueled by alcohol, Ziggy runs through the best days of his life. But his sneakers keep slipping on the snow, and he's been smoking since he was 9. On top of that, physical education isn't his favorite subject at school. Karl Lund often goes running with his colleagues. And, of course, he doesn't smoke. No, not even cigars. Although, according to Ziggy, holding a garbage bag with the word bourgeois, he had seen him, just the day before yesterday, sticking a large penis-shaped cigar into his mouth, somewhere in there, behind the windows of a tasteful wooden house. By the way, Karl Lund doesn't drink brandy from a carafe either, and he isn't a part of Les Morts, nor does he engage in sex tourism in developing countries. The man is sprinting in his high-necked black jumper, the white leather of his sports shoes glinting on the snow. The distance shrinks. Ziggy slips on a corner and takes a new start on his hands. 30 meters away, he hears Karl Lund shouting behind him, "Stay put, fucker." His palms sting, his lungs are bleeding, but the superhuman pain tolerance offered by alcohol speaks for Ziggy again. In fact, he's already pulled his leg muscles to shreds. After years of slouching around, sudden sprints come as a big surprise to them. But Ziggy doesn't feel anything. He could run forever. This is, of course, make-believe. The reality is that his body has its limits, and after an 8-minute chase, they make themselves known. At a railway crossing, the two men are running barely 10 meters apart. Ziggy makes a sharp turn and flies up the stairs to the platform. In the silence of the suburbs, the patter of their feet on the concrete and their increasingly rough breathing can be heard from some distance. Two dark figures move across the platform under the beams of the lanterns, and the distance shrinks again. One look behind him, and Ziggy sees the bourgeois gentleman approaching with brisk, controlled movements, like a robot sent from the future. The boy jumps off the end of the platform, aiming for the railway industrial recesses of the suburb. There, where he hangs around, he keeps his balance as he lands and slumps forward across the snow. In the darkness of the railway embankment, he thinks, he can finally shake the robot off. Why won't he give up already? Usually people like him don't even dare to leave the house. They call their beloved police and then hang out together inside. Ziggy comes first down the snowy strip between the picket fence wall and the railway embankment. The magic of the booze is starting to wear off, and he leaves scrapes on the ground as he runs, like wounded prey. He feels his right leg cramping. So be it. But before that, he still needs it for one last effort. Don't give in now, leg fuck. I'd really like to have a smoke right about now. Behind him, Karl Lund can feel the boy's trail of sweat in his nostrils. He comes from a future where the world didn't end after all. All the people there are bourgeois, and the working class has almost been annihilated. One quick glance at the surroundings, and Karl Lund sees a dead end of garages waiting ahead. He squeezes out the last of his energy, bracing for a crash, intent on ramming into Ziggy at full force and pinning him against the wall. Just one look at that spindly spider, and he knew he could overpower him. The man reaches out and touches the tail of his jacket. At this exact moment, there's only a meter or so of ground left before the garage wall. Ziggy pushes himself directly against the brick with his right leg, but the other cramping leg doesn't really connect with the wall with the grace that he'd had in mind. His plan partially works. He doesn't run up the wall with poise like a Cerise incipherant. He slips, but he still manages to grab the edge of the roof with both hands. Ziggy starts to clamber up the wall, but Karl Lund grabs his leg. "Damn it, kid, give up." But above him, on the roof of the garage, Ziggy's friend towers over him, cheering him on. Ziggy's friend is grand and majestic, though crippled by time. He flutters like a gray flag in the dark, and calls out. A completely destroyed human being rolls himself a smoke in the taiga of northeastern Samara, in the Nad Umai ecoregion, which only recently sank into the Pale. 20 kilometers to the south, the world begins with the People's Republic of Samara. 4,000 kilometers further, to the northeast, is the Katla Isla, and what lies between the two, no one knows. "Don't be naive. Of course it's not some kind of afterlife," Sigismund says, ending the pointless argument. He pulls shreds of tobacco from an aluminium cucumber can and places them on a rolling paper. Before leaving Sapermadulan, He had stocked up on 2 months' worth of smoking supplies. The rations should suffice. In the central market, only dried-up leftovers in jars were offered in exchange for buckwheat coupons. The paper doesn't work either. The adhesive strip doesn't really stick. The paper sticks to his lip, and smoldering tobacco falls from the tip of the cigarette onto his chest. The Entroponaut pats his jacket with his hand, the glowing locusts of sparks the only color in the gray around him. He is sitting in the triangular entrance of his tent, legs out, with a fire sputtering in a hole in the snow in front of him. On the other side of the fire crouches the ghostly gray cytoplasm of Ignis Nielsen, Kraz Mazov's schoolteacher friend and apocalyptic shrike. This gut-wrenching defect in the film tape is framed by koshot spruce trees and fog in the background. He is black and white and completely unnatural. "Happy birthday," says the ghostly gray cytoplasm. 39, answers Sigismund. "Well then, how did this happen?" "You can go ahead and round up to 40. It doesn't matter anymore. Get ready. Tell yourself that you're 40 years old." "I'm 40 years old." 40 years old? What happened? Wasn't there talk about you not getting any older than 20? And you didn't have any plans for this time anyway. Why are you crawling around here?" "You know, Ignis, I'd like to evaporate," the man mumbles and adjusts the fire with a stick. A dark orange tongue of flame comes to life in its heart. "Again? Haven't you evaporated enough already?" "There's always more, Ignis. You can leave less behind. Paper trails, dentists." Ziggy puts a saucepan on the fire, fresh snow melting inside it. "They'll catch you with this tooth business. You should have, back then in Grad, you should have pulled out those suckers yourself with a screwdriver." "I tried, but it was too painful." "I don't understand what you're saying, man. Don't mumble. And besides, if it's not a doctor, you're overestimating the bourgeois justice system. Discretion contracts like honor. They only have pokazuha. Do you remember Mazov?" Ziggy pulls dentures out of his anorak coat and puts them in his mouth. "You're the one always mumbling nonsense. What about Mazov? And besides, look where I am. Who will come to find me anymore? Even the Institute of Entroponautics can't find me here." "You think?" Ziggy puts on an oven mitt and waits for the water to boil. "I think so, yeah. And moreover, this time I don't just want to flee the country." "Well, where do you want to flee from then, Ziggy? Countries are enormous." "From the world." The pail is tinted blue. Snowfields lay beneath it. The water bubbles in the saucepan. "God forbid," sighs Ignis Nielsen, who has been amputated into a stump by the censor of time. The mountain ridge leaves his backward voice hollow, echoless. "My God, I've had more than enough of this disappearance nonsense." After quite a struggle, Ziggy gets his leg free of Carl Lund's grip. He steps on the family man's shoulder and kicks himself up onto the roof of the garage. There he stands, triumphant under the winter sky, so young and so free. The bourgeois crouches in front of him in defeat. "Huh? What are you gonna do now?" Ziggy sputters and gesticulates awkwardly with his hands, as if he's putting down this industrialist. "What you gonna do, huh? Are you gonna try to climb up? I'll slam your fingers to a pulp." He stomps on the edge of the garage to demonstrate what will happen if you climb up towards him. "You will lose. I win. You just fucking lost." "Well done," Ignis Nielsen whispers from the shadows. "I too nobly stuck it to the middle class. Together with Mazov, we killed them, you understand. Hundreds of thousands of them. We killed almost 1,000,000 bourgeois. We would have killed more, but we ran out of time." "I'll kill you," screams Ziggy. On the attic floor, the apocalyptic blacksmith Phyllis has overcome him again, and nothing is forbidden. You hold the world together. I will kill you. I will kill your family. Boy, go to the doctor. Karl Lund waves him off and turns to go. But Ziggy is rolling a snowball in his hands. When it splats against the back of the man's head, he turns around furiously and charges. You little fuck, I'll remember your face. I'll remember your face. Ziggy pokes his face mockingly. I'll remember your face, too. I know where you live. Snow floats around Ziggy. Snowflakes melt in his black hair. Get down here, you waste of space. Get down here if you're such a tough man. Ah, I'm coming. Ziggy throws a snowball down at him, but he dodges. I'm coming down with the angels of death, and they're wearing leather coats. Your family is dead. Pederast. Very stylish, praises Ignis Nielsen from the shadows. Referencing the special committee members was genius. You are a poet, but a poet of actions, not words. I'll rape your wife. You're on fire, boy. You're on fire. Keep going. You're going to be brought to Yakokata. I'll nationalize your company. Now it's getting too theoretical. Don't go there. It's a slippery slope. You don't really know anything about that stuff. Tell him he's a poofda. Poofda. Enraged, Karl Lund tries to climb up, but Ziggy kicks some snow in his face and starts jumping on his fingers, and the man falls back down. Okay, now is a good time to scram, but first say something fierce to him. Poofda. That'll do, says Ignis Nielsen, and Ziggy's leather-jacketed figure disappears into the darkness of the garages. A silhouette emerges from the blue-gray haze, next to the big tires of a dump truck that's blanketed in snow. It is still twilight and gray in Nadumai. Sigismund Berg comes alone down the road on the mountainside, carrying an enormous rucksack, and with an aging rocker's ponytail hidden deep under the furry-edged hood of his anorak coat. Smoke leaks from the hood like a chimney. A man, 2 ski poles in his hands and a cigarette in his mouth, trudges through the entroponatic catastrophe. When Mazov could no longer wait for the world revolution. You mean when he shot himself in the head because he had turned into a monster? Or was it because he was about to lose? It's not like that at all. To his left, Ignis Nielsen flutters like the grey flag. Mazov had a gentle soul. There was reaction everywhere, no matter how many we killed. There were always more of them. And then there were the setbacks. Everything completely collapsed in Neveshol. He was just sad. He didn't think he was a monster. Sigismund's lonely Kirza boot tracks run along the road between the spruce trees. Holes in the snow from ski poles run next to them. Tell me, the power ended up in your hands. How much did it cost? How many comrades did it cost? Tell me how it really was this time. I knew that Mazov's idea was working again when the other communist came to kill me. Was it like that, or wasn't it? Of course not. You want to assume the worst of us, Sigismund, so that you don't have to believe in anything anymore, so that you can do what you came here to do. So tell me, when can the two of us expect a round of cleaning? When will you go on alone? Honestly, I've thought about it, Ignis. Go ahead and think. But know that it wasn't all murder and killing. And when I took over, when I finally had it all in my hands, it was an intoxicating feeling. Can you imagine? The whole country being yours. It was made of nothing but goodness. That feeling. I held Grad gently, like an architect holds districts of panel houses. Rows of grey boxes crackle in Ignis's chest, like a window into history, like matchboxes in the palm of your hand. And I promised that now that I had been given the opportunity, I would do what's best for the people. And you know, I didn't disappoint myself. But it all slipped away, and only one extra Isolari colony remained, some kind of mountain goat shit. Don't be so petty. Be skeptical, but don't underestimate Samara. My heart is buried in Samara. When we retreated here. That's right, retreated. Why did you retreat again? Why do my guys always retreat? It was inevitable, and I wasn't going to throw off my gloves and become a fatalist. I gave everything for this colony, my Samaran Revolutionary Republic. That's right. The People's Republic is senile. I will never forgive them for doing this. After me, they messed it up. The senility. I will never forgive this. The ghostly gray cytoplasm feels defeated. And the Entroponaut goes over a mountain bridge with its barriers open. Empty guard booths are buried in the snow on both sides of the road. At the end of the bridge, a sign reads Nemeng's Ul, 36 kilometers, and then onward through the snowy gray taiga of the Umai Mountains. Only 2 weeks ago, the world's largest reserves of fluoride, tungsten, zinc, and extremely rare samarskite were dug up from the Earth's crust here. Workshops chattered. Industrial waste painted the ecoregion's crisp silver wart into rusty foam. But not anymore now. There is silence and peace here. The Entroponaut goes down the dump truck road into the dark crevice of the valley, the spruce forest darkening around him. In front of him, on the snowy road, runs a flurry of hoofprints. It was spectacular. It was a loss of self, a complete dedication for the good of the people. I was a ruling machine on amphetamines. I never slept. None of us slept. We built it all from nothing, with the help of the Yakuts. It was a brotherhood of nations. They respected our weapons, and we respected their cheerful minds and dancing. In 6 years, a country rose from nothing. The workers worked themselves to death, toiling for the 5th day in a row. They literally died on the construction site of a heart attack, of fatigue, of a gun butt in the back of the head. You think so, but you're wrong. It would be like that now, of course, but it wasn't like that then. You can't imagine what happened here, how it was. It ran through the world like happiness intoxication. Happiness intoxication. Amphetamine was common in your country then, and not yet medically tested. But Ignis doesn't listen. I said terrible things, yes. I stood on a white horse in a blizzard and gave speeches. In the mountains, on the construction site, I swung my sword with silver sunbeams on the hilt, and all around me fluttered white flags, crests of crowned horns made with silver thread. A pentagon between the prongs of the horns, the branches raised to heaven. Everyone who came here with me became happy, Ziggy. Communism is powerful. Believe in communism. It's a burst of enthusiasm, I promise. It's beautiful when you believe in a person. But without it, there is nothing. Nothing. It was a blizzard, but it was bright. It was morning. Communism is white. It sparkles. Communism is the morning. It is a jubilation. The pale begins to recede dangerously around the Entroponaut. The world turns white. Beams of light seep from Ignis's chest into the dim spruce trees. The falling snow sparkles in the beams like silver confetti, the color creeping into the world like a threat. Sigismund stops his foot. He covers his ears with his hands and shouts, "Enough! Stop! Enough! Stop!" Rolls across the field like a sword cutting through the air. "Please forgive me, Sigismund, my friend," says the voice of the distortion. The man is panting in the middle of the forest road. It is dim and twilight again. The pale returns, and the Entroponaut breathes a sigh of relief. "You want me to lose my mind?" "No. I just wanted you to understand how good everything was then. What kind of time it was. What a beautiful time. I'm sorry. That time has passed. It's buried in your punch cards and shit. No one can tell what was there anymore. No one knows what it was really like. It's shifted from its place. What was really there is gone, and only the pale remains. It's an imprint. You do realize that? I realize that. It's those girls of yours who talk like that. The cytoplasm whispers softly in Sigismund's ear. The spruce trees are swaying. It's dim in the pale, but seductively soft. Those girls of yours. Girls don't believe in anything. All girls are bourgeois, Ziggy. They weren't bourgeois. They were bourgeois. Every last one of them. They read their girls' magazines, relish all bourgeois fashion and perfumes, virginity law stories. It's all bourgeois. Every girl is actually a weapon of the bourgeoisie. You didn't know them. You don't know what they were thinking about. No one knows what they were thinking. I don't know either, but it wasn't bourgeois, Ignis. It was something else. If that's what you want to think, then be my guest. But you'd better believe in people, not in them. Believe in communism. I already tried, but I can't. It doesn't work for me. I'm not the communist type. Then why are you talking to me? After all, I am communism itself, the specter that walks the earth. Why have you been with me all these years if you don't believe in communism? Because of anger towards those who've had it better in life, Ignis. And besides, you're a monster, a grotesque. Who doesn't love the company of monsters? I'm not a monster. You are a monster. They call you the apocalyptic Shrike. Who else do you know who called that? No one is called that. All of that Grod massacre was by your hand. Your signature is everywhere, and during the retreat, when Mazov had stopped giving orders, you had the enemy soldiers impaled on trees. 12,000 of them. You had spruce trees sharpened into spears. You made a forest of spears. It was obscene, Ignis. It was so that they would let me build my nation of the future. You don't understand, they never would have let us alone. They would have shot us like wild game. That may be the case, but still, excess. Shrike, look what's become of you. Human speech sounds out of place in the silence of the pale. It echoes in the gloom of the trees as Sigismund trudges through the snow. There's an old trick coined by the great ENTROPONAUT K. Veronican that you have to shout into the pale. Otherwise, you start to feel gloomy, and the past comes up. But Sigismund needn't be afraid of that. When he first entered the pale, he discovered to his great dismay that he couldn't return like everyone else. Or rather, he could, but not where he really wants. This makes him indispensable to Mazov's idea. The disappearance of the Land children has literally given Ziggy special entroponetic powers. The morning has passed. It's getting dark. A few tens of kilometers further on, the far pale begins, and the world's times of day no longer register there at all. He has to save up his batteries for that. He considers it, but then turns his flashlight on anyway. The snow shimmers in the beam of the light, and Sigismund directs it to his wretched friend. The Ignis defect shines through. Look at yourself. You're pathetic. It would be better for everyone if they'd done a clean job. A bunch of amateurs. I ought to set all the film tapes of you on fire. It's so cruel, somehow, that you're lingering here. But then you would never have known me, Ziggy. Think of all the times we've shared. After all, not everything has been bad. What about me? I'm talking about you. Wouldn't a history without you in it be better? There would be no forest of spears and amphetamine, no stump of cytoplasm. Who needed this at all? It doesn't mean anything anymore anyway. Ignis tries to buy time. You know what? It doesn't matter how many we killed. The world is ending, so no one will remember me, not to mention you, if even the mighty of this world are not remembered. It's better that way. That is the way it should be. And the mighty of this world, you're an ugly monstrosity who ran amok in this world. You rampage too. Look at your hands, Ziggy, let's not forget. One more word. Say it, and you're gone. The ENTROPONAUT snaps. Compared to you, I haven't done anything. And besides, Which of us is the commissar of the revolution? Is that you? No, it's not. Ignis shivers, frightened. I'm sorry, friend. 10,000 apologies. You alone are the commissar of the revolution. Sigismund Berg, the top of the party in your mind. I have no authority. All I have is this humble critique I've written about myself. Take it, but don't kill me. There is nothing on the other side of me. I'll do anything to stay, anything at all. I am hope. You know what I want. This is the last thing. Start talking. But Ignis is unable to speak. He has no mouth. The defect of the film strip frolics in the dark, in the beam of the flashlight. This is the height of cruelty. The impossible is required. An uncomfortable silence spreads in the forest air around him. Everyone is embarrassed. Why, Ignis? The Entroponaut repeats and leans closer, peering into the heart of history with a flashlight. Why did you do that? There was no point. I understand why you emptied the banks. It was necessary. You even took a symphony orchestra with you in the retreat by force. People like music. But why that? Who's happy about that? Why HARNANKUR? That model didn't serve any purpose. Tell me that, and you can stay. But I don't have any clue. The inside-out voice sounds sad. The soundtrack slows down. I don't know anything that you don't. No more chants. The Entroponaut shakes himself. Snow falls from the shoulders of the anorak coat. He goes on alone. An hour of frozen machine tracks and hoofprints in the snow run along in the flashlight beam. And when a herd of ibex finally emerges from the darkness, they are frozen in place in the middle of the road, like an exhibit in a natural history museum. Some of the females sometimes jerk in place, sneezing. This is a nervous impulse, a muscle tremor. The backs of the stuffed animals are already covered with snow, but their snouts are still steaming. They're still breathing. Some for a few days, some for a week. An anorak-clad figure moves through the herd with the indifference of a professional until the beam of his flashlight casts the alpha male's crown of horns as a shadow on the wall of spruce trees. Sigismund looks into the animal's glazed eyes. Its sense of time has broken down. An automaton's primitive fragment of a brain strays in the pale faster than that of a human. This is how hunters from the outskirts go hunting in the ENTROPONAUT. Of course, they'll eventually go mad from it as well, and one day they won't return. But not Ziggy. He has special abilities. He takes a pocket knife from his belt and slits the protein mass's throat. 17. HARNANKUR. 150 years ago, on another Isla, the Grad Isla, it snows in the city of Mirova. It's a midwinter evening, but thousands of people have gathered in the harbor. The quay bustles with them. In the background lies Imperial Grad, church steeples and chimneys. The crowd is waving, bidding farewell to the airship rising into the sky. A swan made of wood and nickel rises into the blizzard, and the passengers of the world's first interinsulary flight wave to the crowd from its balcony's baskets. Well-dressed, bougie people, with a never-before-seen adventure ahead of them. It's the Pale. Terrifying. But at the same time, such an upbeat and unforgettable experience. Modern technology, in the form of a luxuriously upholstered airship, now makes such an experience possible for an ordinary, if perhaps slightly better off, citizen. And on the other side of the Pale, oh, mystical Pale, the land of Katla awaits, with its royal capital of Vasa. This juncture in history is monumental. Journalists are swarming. Photo flashes are lighting up. The small bulbs in the cameras burn out. Their light causes snowflakes to freeze in the air. That's the exposure time in which Nadia HARNANKUR is captured. The operetta star poses for the photo arm in arm with the chief engineer, wearing a fur hat, with her long, beautiful neck craned out. She smiles and waves her handkerchief at her namesake in the sky. The letters HARNANKUR in the old Gradian alphabet adorn the departing airship. This is the peak of Nadia's fame. 2 days later, the interstellary flight enters the Pale, and then, barely 6 hours later, a deviation occurs in the airship's course. HARNANKUR has gone missing, with 1,500 passengers on board. The flight is believed to have drifted into an uncharted entroponic mass, the Pale Superdeep. But who all thinks that? Para-historians, evaporation nerds, and a couple of crazy SRV Pale fanatics. Men like K. Veronican, a demented entroponaut and communist from the People's Republic of Samara, and an internationally unrecognized authority on the field of history, Inayat Khan, who I guess doesn't live in his mother's basement anymore. Regardless, other parts of historical science, which men of the Khan and Veronican type contemptuously call the mainstream, do not recognize the existence of an airship called HARNANKUR. The first civilian interstellary flight was Anastasia Lux, and that happened 1 decade later. 75 years later, when the revolutions of the turn of the century had subsided, HARNANKUR was more or less forgotten. The documentation that newspaper archives provided could have been destroyed, for example in the fires of the Grad Revolution, but still, the event would be too large-scale for that. If historical memory proves itself backhandedly, even in the case of a small cog like Julius Kuznetsky, the disappearing commissar, then where did the world's first interstellary flight, with 1,500 people on board, disappear to? In the century after the revolution, HARNANKUR finally sank into the shadows of history. Until the 50s, that is, when interest in disappearance cases suddenly took on the dimensions of a subculture in the middle class of developed countries. Certainly not an inexplicable phenomenon. These men, mostly young and unpopular with the opposite sex, were dubbed desaparatists after the best-selling book of their genre, Los Desaparecidos. They became interested in one photo, one Nadia HARNANKUR, a marginally interesting disappearance case, standing in the harbor. She is waving, fur hat on her head, arm in arm with the chief engineer. There are unearthly crowds in the background, and they are all waving at something in the sky. But there in the sky is a mysterious void. This void is the holy grail of disappearance nerds. According to the desaparatists, the best fit is the most convincing bit of evidence, an industrial presentation model of the airship of the same name, which the communists took with them to the then Revolutionary Republic, now People's Republic, when they retreated from Grad to Samara. The original is on display at Saparmat-Ulan's Museum of Entroponetics, and is taken very seriously by the communists. It's just a pity that no one takes the communists seriously. The SRV Entroponaut K. Saranovich Veronican argues in his memoirs that the ship had to exist because the model is technically feasible from an engineering standpoint. In other words, it could carry more than 1,000 people through the Pale on a commercial trip with all the amenities. The production of such an industrial project must have been a brilliant scientific achievement of its time. Why not turn all this work into a commercially attractive business? It would not be diamaterialist at all. Critics say that more than 200 fieldwork campaigns into the Pale have left their mark. According to Veronican, the project that was being carried out, again according to him, was lost forever on the first trip. Would the model still work? Could HARNANKUR be some sort of failed prototype of Anastasia Lux? Why is there no documentation at all? K. Veronican, however, claims that the model was made into a ship. The ship deviated from its course, and it encountered an as-of-yet unknown phenomenon in the Pale. (18) 3 meat PIROSHKIS. 148 years later, Mirova, the capital of Grad, glows behind the walls of high-rise windows. During the fevered nights of history, all of its imperial architecture was blown up. Then the rioters were driven out, and now the city is a spirit resurrected by democracy, into a ghost glowing with lights. It is a terrible, out-of-control living environment, in constant motion in the glass reflections of its skyscrapers. Like some mythological horror, Mirova can only be looked at in a mirror. Its movement is Grad's unstoppable economic growth made physical, an assertion of true thermodynamic impossibility. Subways slide by. Pearly rivers of traffic swirl day and night. The nerve center, Nu, can be seen from here, from the 60th floor. Nu is the height of arrogance of one nation, the nation of Grad, a financial peninsula. The scientists here claim, once the Earth was covered with the geosphere, and then with the biosphere, now is the time of the noosphere. A mind covered the Earth, and Nu's skyscrapers are the throne of that network. The throne of the mind. Here it does its arithmetic in long-distance calls, in invisible transmissions. Its thoughts are intangible financial instruments. No one knows what they are, or how much they cost. The mirrored glasses are black, obviously the interisolary real. But what is a person? A person is light. The scientific community of the People's Republic, the third generation of expelled rioters, laughs at this. In Samara, they have also introduced a fourth term, the entroposphere. The wave equations, Samara's calculations, are promising. Any moment, this beautiful thing will sweep Grad off the face of the earth. In that barely perceived place where communism becomes nihilism, definitely a more subtle transition than from a friend of children to a molester of children, the cream of the crop of the political party seems to think, why not? Our idea is no longer to win your hearts, and, let's be honest, we never will. We love the idea, but the world somehow doesn't. Let it disappear then, if that's how it's going to be. When Saryan Ambartsumyan turns his back on the window of his new penthouse, only 2 years remain until that day. There will be a class reunion. Then, the Northern Pass will collapse. And in the chain of events that's triggered, it will become clear that what's shining behind Ambartsumyan is nothing less than the last stage of development of Stihia. All light comes from outside. Snow floats by outside the window, evaporating from the howl of Nu's thoughts long before it reaches street level, 60 stories below. There will never again be winter in Mirova. Only here under the sky does it still exist. It's cold in the hall. The pillars stand out in the darkness. The phone rings. Ambartsumyan walks over barefoot, wearing a suit. The shadows of snowflakes dance on the glass display cases around him, which contain the world's largest private collection of disappearance memorabilia. Sometime in the past, before Ambartsumyan became a 50-year-old oil billionaire, he had been a young man without much success with the opposite sex. One of the first. Only the ringing of the telephone breaks the dignified silence of the hall. The man takes a seat at his desk and clicks the speaker on. He places his free hand on the skull of Ramot Karzai, where it sits on the desk. It is authentic. I'm listening. Some man from Katla, Vasa area code, reports the faithful secretary. He says that the number was given at a private collection auction, but I think he probably wants a loan. Why? Well, this long-distance call is at the expense of the respondent. Ambartsumyan roars with laughter. At the respondent's expense. All right, connect. But a loan. The man waits, one hand on Ramot Karzai's skull, the other on his gray beard. He is of a massive stature. You don't give loans. Exactly. Out of principle, I don't. Connect. The speaker switches to a long-distance call. The pail seeps into the hall air from the fabric-covered ziggurat. The signal runs as an entroponatic sequence through the great unknown, from Katla to Grad. Relay stations clear the call from the noise of history along the way. But something always creeps into the wires. A ghost radio station. Its quiet voice, in its unintelligible language, reminds us what it's here for. to end life. Azimuth, Boreas, Sinus, passes through the broadcast on a radio frequency and disappears. And Bartsumian is used to it. Through the noise, and 3,000 kilometers of pale, a distorted human voice is heard. It says, "Hello, greetings. My name is Inayat Khan." Who? Inayat Khan. Okay, Yat Khan. Where did you get my number? Inayat Khan. I got it from the Norrköping Fair, the auction. They said to call about your hobby. Are you still Mr. The man rubbages around for something. Mr. Bartsumian? Yes, that's me. And you collect things from people who have disappeared? Disappeared, the pale whispers on the loudspeaker. Yes, I collect them, replies Bartsumian. And no, it is not my hobby. I put my heart into what I do. I take it seriously. I do too. You can be sure of that. Can I? Things from people who have disappeared. What are you talking about? The correct term is still disappearance memorabilia. Bartsumian sinks contentedly into his armchair in the dimness of the hall. Well said. The armchair is made of expensive leather. Listen, I know what the correct term is, all right. Khan is starting to get pissed off. Meetings between disapparatists are rarely cordial. They tend to quarrel. It's not like I'm calling about my very first purchase ever. And no, I'm not buying it as a paperweight either, if that's what you're afraid of. So you have a professional collection? You wouldn't ask me that if you gave me a chance to tell you what I just bought. How extensive is your collection? You see, you're not letting me tell you. Well, I will eventually. I'd still like to know first who I'm talking to. Bartsumian doesn't raise his voice. After years of training, it contains only a barely perceptible hint of the whiny voice cracking of a nerd. His zits are also rather more psychological. His gray beard is authoritative. He strokes Ramut Karzai's skull like a pet. Anyway, I consider the technical model of the HARNANKUR to be my crown jewel, exclaims Khan, a whimpering note in his voice. Who are you talking to over there? A woman's voice in the background spoils the drama of the moment. Come eat, the food is getting cold. Khan muffles the receiver with his hand, but the hall still echoes with, Mom, let me talk. Stop interrupting. Mother, the pale hisses back. This is my mother. Bartsumian shakes his head. He leans closer to the table. And you have HARNANKUR. Yes, I have it, says Khan. A copy? Nope. I went thieving in Sapermarulan. Of course I don't have the original, and you don't have it either. Khan gathers himself for a moment. I understand that you have another copy in your possession, yes? That's why I'm calling. It's written in the contract, the responsibility of the owner. I have to get a service manual from you. Do you have any idea what this is? Bartsumian is dead serious. Do you know how important this is? There's nothing left after this. Bartsumian nods slowly. Right. You have to devote time to her. To hold her. You have to think of her. Like how you think of a girl, understand? Like a beautiful girl. Have you ever seen one? You have to be responsible. It's not a toy. To think of her? In what sense? That's the maintenance manual. You didn't think I was going to tell you about the Switch. For example, did you know that there was also a third copy? A third copy? Khan doesn't understand. Of course you didn't know. Bartsumian gravely folds his hands on his chest. Now you know. There was also a third copy. But all that remained was an empty display case. You have to watch her. All the time. Don't let her out of your sight. Don't leave her alone. And when you do, think of her. Do you think it's a coincidence that they keep the original in a museum? Think. Hundreds of people pass by every day, and they look at her. And then, when the museum is closed, the night watchmen are watching. Khan says nothing. A ghost-like hum echoes through the ether. This is an impossible object, concludes Bartsumian. The world no longer supports her. The pail freezes at the bottom of the valley. 2 years later. There is no longer a single soul on the forest crossing. A ribbon of blood drops trails across the snow, along the dark tunnel of the road, in competition with boot prints, past the giant spruce trees, weighed down by snow, until the intersection with the main road. There, at the intersection, there's a red puddle on the ground, and next to it, an abandoned campfire. There is a homemade frame on the fire. 2 branches hold a third one over the extinguished fire pit. Bones, gnawed clean, lay in the snow. And forward, along the highway where cars no longer drive, frozen electric wires meander in the dark. Drop by drop across the blanket of snow with the boot prints, with terrible determination, the wrecks of crawler machines sleep in a ditch by the road. The dark shape of a fuel oil station looms behind a bend. Oriole, laudanum, ultra, tricolor, ellipse. Something is rising. There is a screeching sound of steel. Tell me that you understand what I'm talking about, and that you will start doing it. M. Bartsumian orders. I think so. I'll try. Don't just try, do it. You'll understand eventually. After the third one disappeared, I became paranoid, to say the least. To this day, when I walk into the room and turn on the lights, I fear it will happen again. That there will be an empty display case in the middle of the room, or that there will be nothing in this room at all. You will soon have the same outlook, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. In what sense are you afraid that it will happen again? The wording does not go unnoticed by Khan. M. Bartsumian is silent. He taps the skull on the table. What do you mean by again? Repeats Khan. I lost her. That's what happened. She was mine, too. The third one. But you know, it wasn't like it usually is, when something disappears. Keys, for example, or something expensive. Have you felt it? Been faced with such a phenomenon? With such a feeling? The professional arrogance in Khan's voice is wiped away in an instant. I have, he says. Then you know what I'm talking about. Someone knows what I'm talking about. The man's hand slips from Ramad Karzai's skull. The floodlights of a distant airship slide by outside the window of the hall, and the shadows of the pillars creep along the floor. When did it start for you? Asks M. Bartsumian. 18 years ago. That was the first time. From there on, Khan falls silent. From there on, it gets more and more frequent, right? Yes, answers Khan. And on top of other things, too. What other things? M. Bartsumian has now moved his ear to the speaker, his chest on the table. All things? Yes. Side streets, a girl riding a bicycle, and light, or when a horse looks on, especially animals, in the whole world. Yes, the whole world. On both sides of the highway, heavy tracked machines, iron relics, rise up into the pale. They spin, helpless bodies, snow falling from their rusty frames. This is how matter degrades, drop by drop, like an analog rhythm running from red through the colorless world. The international alphabet is hidden in the low-frequency waves. Nadir, ellipse, gamut, azimuth, and so on, to the border of the settlement. Nemeng-ul has a ghost district of panel houses. The streets are empty. There are 3-story concrete buildings rising on the hillsides on either side of the valley. A single bicycle hangs in the air next to a swing. Otherwise, everything is completely normal. Convenience store windows and a community center pass by. Footprints run up the stairs to the hospital door, where the padlock has been broken open. He will escape. He escapes. Tricolor, Lycan, Oriole, Nadir, echoes in the dark of the corridor. Connection terminated. And it's been like this for you for 18 years. It's been 12 for me. And Bartsumyan sinks back into his chair, deep into the leather. Then it gets worse. But eventually, Khan's voice hisses in the curve of the pail. Eventually, it changes somehow. It's somehow good, this feeling. Good. Yes. As if everything will be all right. As if everything will be all right, sighs Bartsumyan. I don't have it anymore. And it's better like that. I sold mine, the remaining model, a while ago. This endless watching, the obligation, the man collects himself. It wore on me. You sold it just like that. Just like that. And cheap, too, to the first bidder. The man seemed right. He really wanted it, too. That was important. There must be someone who would take care of a thing like that. Someone who looks at her a lot and doesn't let her disappear. Like me. 1,500 people it was. But the register says it's still in your hands. What register? The auction register. Khan's voice is getting increasingly sharp. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you. I would talk to the new owner. No, I don't understand. The man had to register it himself. Are you certain? And Bartsumyan gets up and walks around the table, still holding the skull. Perhaps. Who did you sell it to, if you still remember? Of course I remember, okay, snorts Bartsumyan. Berg was his name, a private collector. Sigismund Berg, the speaker blasts, with black hair, skinny. Something like that, yes. It was, what was it now, 10 years ago? But yes, Sigismund Berg. Are you absolutely sure? Was he foul-mouthed? No, actually tell me, did he speak with an accent, as if he lived in Vasa? God, I don't remember such details. There could have been an accent. Why is this so important? You said 10 years ago. What year exactly? 59. Or 60. Why? In any case, it was after 57. Absolutely certain. Listen, I have the papers here. There you go. Commands Bartsumyan with the skull towards the speaker. Why is it so important all of a sudden? Because the voice in the ziggurat could explode with excitement at any moment. That man died in 57. The giant-like oil billionaire hunches over the table. Please repeat that. What? But on the other end, Khan is no longer listening. A clue, he explodes. And the last thing that Bartsumyan hears is the man's distant voice in an ever-increasing hiss. Mom, Mom, I found a clue. 2 years later. The platform of Mirova's floating train station has emptied for the night. The rest of the passengers have long gone home. The magnet train, stopped by its buffers, rests above the city, next to the platform. The 5-story scales of the cars tower above, and next to them, through the blizzard, a robot walks. A voice approaches. Zut, zut, zut. The robot walks, and a big fat pilot sitting on it in the cockpit turns the robot's head. Tee-dee-dee-dit, answers the control system. The machinery corrects, of course. The flaps of its herringbone coat blowing in the wind. Hey, seriously, maybe that's enough of that. The thin blonde man next to the robot grumbles. His head is throbbing. Behind him lies a 6-day-long train ride of binge drinking, full of incessant gibberish about disappearances. Bartsumyan and Ziggy, Ramut Karzai's skull, and a vanished airship with characteristics that remind Khan of the girls. But the amateur entreponetics got so morbid that no one really wanted to think about it. And then they found themselves on the stage of the bar, Panorama, singing karaoke. All 3 of them. Now I'm so happy I found you. Zut, zut, zut. The robot speeds up instead. The pilot has pulled the machine's head back, That's why. That means acceleration. The robot goes along, and the fat man giggles on its shoulders, a turquoise orange-violet scarf blowing in the wind. Hydraulica, sprona, rozpoczynam, diagnostica. Hydraulics operational, starting diagnostics, says the robot in a robot's voice, and moves along. Weapon systems, check, the pilot orders, snapping his fingers in the direction of the skinny person below. Systemi brogenua sproni. Weapon systems operational, replies the robot. The skinny blonde abruptly hands the pilot a bottle. He puts the fuel in the machine's mouth. It roars, and red liquid drips onto the snow. Reservi, paliwa, 100%. Fuel reserves, 100%. Forward. The fat man points to the blizzard. Wait, says the robot, and adjusts its load. Are you ready? Ready. Rozpoczynam. Protocol poszukiwawczy. Ratunkowi. Starting. Search and rescue protocol, says the robot. But it only manages to take 3 steps. Zoot, zoot, zoot. When, far on the other side of the platform, someone steps out of the blizzard. The robot is startled. The fat man falls off its back. The blonde instinctively dodges. The wanted agent, Therese Majicek, pulls a pistolet from his coat pocket, and the man from Internal Affairs on the other side of the platform reciprocates. Behind him, 2 more agents of the ICP appear out of the storm, pistols in firing position. They aim, and Majicek, the wanted agent, aims back at them. It's sad to see, says the man from Internal Affairs, how far he has fallen. Just imagine 22 solved cases. But now, a compulsive disappearer. The floating station hangs in the air like a black spirit above Mirova's glow. Therese Majicek, a former agent, stands there on the platform, on a windy street beneath the sky. The man from Internal Affairs can see his unshaven beard, the tie thrown over his shoulder, and his drunkard's face. The flavored berry wine freezes on his chin. His tobacco-stained teeth transform into something like a smile. His 2 friends, hunched on the snow, are gesturing at him. They are panicking. The man from Internal Affairs wears a proper black coat and a black suit. Did you think that you could just disappear from ICP? He shouts into the storm. You put the gun down, you come in calmly, and no one gets hurt. There are 20 men down below. There is no escape from here. The maddened agent shouts something, but it's inaudible in the rising wind. The bloodhound of Internal Affairs cups his ear with his hand. What? František the Brave comes from the other side of the platform, along with a pistolet shot. No, shouts Khan. Ziggy kicks open the door in slow motion. Splinters fly. The spine of the lock gives in with a rattle. The door comes off its hinges and hangs there miserably. A bare-chested boy stands in the doorframe, a bottle of wine in his right hand. He sweats from amphetamines, longs for pampering and beauty. He is 17 years old, with 3 years left on his shelf life. The boy puts his left hand in his pants. Which of you bourgeois whores wants to fuck? A living room with respectable interior design spreads out in front of Ziggy. 22 middle-class people sit there. A house party. Half of them are girls, but none of them want to sleep with Ziggy. It's the evening of the next day, New Year's Eve. 51 will turn to 52 in 2 hours, and these young people are Ziggy's new schoolmates. Right about now is when they start to think that maybe they shouldn't have invited Ziggy. Enough. Handsome Alexander jumps up from the sofa, but he doesn't get these words out in time. Get out, you waste of space. He can't betray his friend Ziggy, because, to be honest, Ziggy has no friends. Ziggy is a sweaty monster. He shouts, Ziggy, strike first. And then a bottle of red wine flies into handsome Alexander's face. The young man, beautiful as Absalom, covers his face with his hands. My God, my face! He looks at the wine on his hands and thinks it's gushing blood. His face! Shouts Alexander's girl, one of many, and jumps behind the couch. He broke Alex's face, the whole room murmurs. Handsome Alexander himself is blinded by grief. His wine-drenched face contorts as an impossibly beautiful battle cry escapes his lips. Ah! He lunges at Ziggy's feet. My face, I'll kill you. A sweaty junkie and a male beauty in a tight shirt are rolling around on the floor. Ziggy tries to get up, but handsome Alexander won't let him. He punches as hard as he can. He's really being rough. There seems to have been a miscalculation. Ziggy forgot that handsome Alexander goes to the gym after school and pays equal attention to all of his muscle groups. Ziggy is in pain. The floor lamp topples over, along with someone's cup. Inside Ziggy's skull, the middle-class youth is spinning in the shallow underwater blows of his fists. Ziggy can hear voices, girls' voices. They say, junkie, loser. His hand scrambles around, but he can't get a single weapon in his hands. Ah, if only there were a sword, a beautiful sword, with an inverted pentagon in the hilt, like the sun's rays. Damn it, let's go help Alex. The daring boys approach, and send kicks straight to his stomach. Ziggy thrashes, held back by a tough, muscular body. Pray. Always pray. The cytoplasm whispers. The internal affairs agent's coat flutters. There, in its black fabric, is a tiny bullet hole. Useless, silly resistance. 3 puffs of gun smoke fly into the blizzard in response. The former collaboration police agent's kneecap explodes on impact. The first shot sweeps Therese off his feet. The second hits his shoulder. A splash of tendons and blood clots in the blizzard. Front. Con hears his friend mumbling. He raises his head from the snow. Therese's potato-colored hair, spattered with blood, blows in the storm. Hazel eyes, damp from the wind. That's how the Kokyo gets up on his knees. His pistolet shakes. Gunpowder spills into the barrel. Ball-bearing ammunition flows from his coat pocket. But Therese can't find it in the snowy pool of blood. His wounded hand can't handle the delicate fingerwork of loading. Everything gets messed up. 3 cloaked figures approach on the platform, cautiously, their backs hunched like jackals. Therese falls on his back, crawls backwards. He drags a trail of blood through the snow with his wet, ragged clothes. His pistol and gunpowder are left behind in the steaming pool in front of Khan. With their coattails flapping like wings, 3 co-op agents sweep past Khan. The man from Internal Affairs crouches and winds up, pistol in hand. Khan watches in shock as Therese gets punched in the face by the Angel of Death's pistol grip and jerks back. With all of that, no one will notice Jesper clawing at the puddle. He doesn't know why, but he hides his friend's service weapon in his chest pocket, like memorabilia. Ziggy flies through the garden gate. 2 boys threw him out by his arms and legs, like a sack of potatoes. The boy lands in a heap on the street of the garden city. The white picket fence glows next to him, in the dark. The gate remains ajar as the boys leave. Before the house door is slammed shut, music can be heard from inside. The party has started up again inside. But then, silence. Snowflakes sparkle, and the Katla winter night is icy clear. And Ziggy, with some effort, rolls himself onto his back under it. His body doesn't obey his commands. He's still laying around bare-chested in the snow. The dear-doomed world is spinning all around him. The wreaths of light from the streetlights shine in his black eyes, in the wheels of the horse carriage. The boy begins to laugh, setting the dogs barking, and their barking makes all the dogs in the neighborhood bark. Good prey, whispers the cytoplasm. Communism loves you. Now pull yourself up on your stumps, go back in, and butcher the whole house. Ziggy grabs a handful of cold snow and rubs it on his face. The snow turns into red berry jelly at the base of his nose. He slams a snowball against his swollen eye socket. The barking of dogs in the darkness echoes against his eardrums. "At least break a window. Tell them they're bourgeois." "They don't understand," yells Ziggy. "They don't know what a bourgeois is. Don't you understand that it doesn't offend them? They don't know what it means." "How can they not know what bourgeois means?" Just like that. Ziggy growls and slaps his hand out on the snow. It's a random historical word, romantic even, like curious or coquette. He tries to prop himself up on his elbows, but he can't. He collapses. Snow crunches under the soles of someone's shoes in the garden. "They're coming to kill you. Run, pray." "Shut up," whispers Ziggy. All the dogs fall silent at once. Somewhere, a delicate coat rustles. The smell of winter wafts into his nose, so sweet that he doesn't dare to breathe anymore. He holds his breath, and in the distance, the snow crunches in the dark. He knows what those footsteps are. Those footsteps destroy. His destruction and Ilmara's. That's the direction in which the original civilization worshipped, 1,500 years ago, and that's where it vanished from history, with all its pillars and ancient string instruments, so no one really knows where those ethnicities came from. All those people. The garden gate creaks open. It sounds like a memory, gone as soon as it happens. Ziggy doesn't understand what's causing this terrible feeling. It must be the Samaran meth. The boy can't take it anymore, and he exhales. A silver breath rises from his battered mouth. Doom stands over him and breathes. 21 years later, an Entroponaut walks along the empty hospital corridors of Nimeng's-Ul. Blood drips onto the linoleum from 2 freshly flayed goat legs on his back. He carries a fuel oil canister in each hand. He kicks the door open and strides up the fire escape to a large steel door. There he finally stops and sets the canisters down. The fuel oil inside sets them ringing. The Entroponaut draws pliers from his rucksack like a sword. The iron clicks. The sound of steel echoes down the stairwell of the abandoned emergency room, and further back, through the far pale, through the abandoned ghost district of panel houses, to the highway, the fueling station, the intersection. It echoes. Along the trail of blood, to the campfire, and to the dark forest, to the Museum of Natural History, where mold grows on the horns of the males and puffs of steam no longer rise from the kids' nostrils. They still breathe. Not oxygen, but pure pale. The door flies open, and the Entroponaut steps out onto the roof of the hospital. The pale moves in waves there. He walks through it in his anorak jacket, canisters in hand and goat legs on his back. He drops the containers and kicks them forward. The canisters slide across the snow on the floor, fuel oil sloshing inside them. The Entroponaut runs a hand through his receding hairline and aging rocker ponytail. In front of him on the landing platform, under the tarpaulin cover, floats an object the size of a small house. His backpack falls into the snow. He grabs the cable holding the cover taut. The oily steel slips between his gloves. He tightens the cable. The object sways in the pail. The carabiner clicks free from its attachment, and Sigismund lets it zip open. The dark canvas rises up into the pail like a bird, and below it, a small airship comes into view. The robust iron lump floats like an armored apricot stone, held to the ground with cables. A stenciled inscription runs along the armor plates of the ship. Rue 501, a Samaran brand of small airship. High above the hospital, the tarpaulin cover flutters like a flag. Sigismund Berg watches from the landing pad as it twists into the pail. He starts climbing up a cable. After only half an hour, the hermetic door opens inward with a hiss. Oxygen flows out of the cockpit. The porthole and gauge covers fog up from the change in atmosphere. A sweaty Sigismund Berg climbs in through the door. The small, bedroom-sized space shakes with his effort, and the ship sways. He throws the anorak coat to the floor angrily, and resolves to never wear it again. It's practical, that's for sure, and even a uniform for an Entroponaut. But for him personally, the jacket is associated with a fad that his eyes should never have seen. Disco. The man starts pulling up the ropes tied to his waist. He still doesn't say anything, not a word, even though he's covered in bruises from falling. He doesn't even swear. First comes the backpack, then the goat legs, and last of all, 2 fuel oil canisters clank against the hull of the ship. He collapses against the wall, exhausted, and rests there for a moment, rolls a smoke and puts it behind his ear, pulls out the rolled-up maps. Matchbox held between his teeth, he lines up the maps on the wall of cockpit devices. Aerial photographs are lined up in a row. The dark green taiga of Narumai, a cluster of concrete boxes in Nemeng-ul, and next to it, the former border of the world, as if drawn in grey watercolor. A huge, empty mess full of azimuths, ellipses, and sinusoids begins where the world ends. And even farther away from this geometric maze, in the most magnificent of solitudes, in the eye of the cycle, where no destination leads, runs a line of tiny dots, a distant constellation, a superposition. This is the terminus. Rodionov's trench is located in the heart of the Pale, 4,000 kilometers from the edge of the world. It would take years to fly there. He looks down, and on his hand, tattooed on his white knuckles, are numbers strung along like pearls in a necklace. 5, 12, 13, 14. Sigismund Berg turns the ignition key. Lights come on in the cockpit. Fog lights up, golden, in the middle of the Pale. A buzz of electricity passes through the airship like a purr. Needles jump behind the indicator glasses. Welcome, Entroponaut. The man presses the button on the ship's stereo 8 player, labeled Start, in Samarran lettering. The label on the disc says, in a girl's swooshy handwriting, Ziggy's Ride to the End of the World mixtape. When the tape starts spinning, the heart will be in the middle of the last I of the name, Ziggy. Rock music from the 50s, from a now burned-out band of Surrey's drunkards, plays from the transistor radio. It's a beautiful song, which, unfortunately, the bourgeois didn't understand. Track 1, Helveti, was too complex, too dark, and the lyrics were too intense for their established, womb-shaped musical taste. May they rot in hell. By the time the Pale invades the corners of their kitchens and turns them into protein masses, the members of this ensemble, which, despite their best efforts, haven't garnered a large audience, will have already drunk themselves to death in front of the Lemminkäs village store. Ziggy lights the smoke. He nods his head to the rhythm in the middle of the cockpit, wearing a caracol sweater. These tunes are the real deal, and they say it like it is. But something is still missing. You forgot your jacket, Ziggy, says the destruction in the darkness, in a girl's voice. But Ziggy doesn't dare to open his swollen eyes. He knows what really awaits him there. The scent of snow is all around, in his broken capillaries. Oh, bourgeois perfume. Yoo-hoo, the destruction sings. Your jacket? Tell me. Destruction, Ziggy croaks in the dark space of winter. Is it a rad jacket? A pretty rad jacket, yeah. The zippers jingle above him. Blood flows into his mouth. A snowball melts in his eye socket. He coughs. Clever destruction. So you like jackets? I do. And you know who I am? Of course. Destruction exclaims happily. You're Ziggy, the baddest boy in school. 21 years later, Sigismund Berg opens the ship's toolbox. There's a black leather jacket lying on top of the wrenches. It's his jacket. He pulls it on. The shoulders no longer sit properly. His back has developed a hunch. The zipper doesn't close around the beer belly either, but so be it. It's rad like that. He leaves it open. There are 7 white stripes running down the back, and they still look totally evil. Like this, the Entroponaut stands in the cockpit door of his airship and tosses his ponytail over his shoulder. Surrey's rock echoes outside in the frozen pale. The harmonica howls. You could say that Ziggy is self-chilling there at the door. Muta mica onma, si on helveti. But which is the land? It is hell. He hums along, and hits the danger button with his palm. Thus, the clatter of the iron frame sounds over the beginning of the beat. The propeller landing gear falls down. The ship begins to rattle to the music. Her propellers unfolding in the pail like luxuriant steel petals, the blades hanging down. And what comes next is the song's most intense lyrical passage. Sei ol mikan ko hupaika. It is not a scary place, he sings, and the familiar upside-down echo joins him. Together, they are mighty one last time. Eneminkin ciela an surulista. Rather, it is sad there. The ghostly grey cytoplasm of Ignis Nielsen stands on the landing platform below, between the unfolding propeller blades. Sigismund stares at him, and Ignis looks back at Sigismund. The pail flows in and out of the beating heart of the cytoplasm. Ignis is only a slightly brighter clump in the ascending far pale, and the enemy of matter drifts through him, like wings. Communism forgives you, he says. Communism understands. Ignis, mutters the Entroponaut. Forgive me. Already done. We also had a man of your measure in Grad. Ion Rodionov was his nom de guerre. I also considered him a friend. I guess you know that name, because of the trench. But you don't know who he was. He was the mathematician of the revolution, at the top of the party with me and Mazov. No one knows that, nor why he took the HARNANKUR model from Grad with him. But I don't know that. The cigarette drops from Sigismund's mouth. Of course you don't know. Only the commissar of the revolution and a handful of close associates know this. This man is a real non-entity. His whole life's work is like this. If they were already unable to accept dialectical materialism, how could we have explained Neil Mott to them? Sigismund is silent. The song ends. He wanted to use it as a weapon of mass negation against the bourgeoisie. That would have been our answer to a nuclear weapon. You know that there is no uranium in Samara. But he couldn't find that place. We found it, says the SRV Entroponaut. The ropes holding the airship down snap loose like whips. Too bad. I've never been too fond of that wing of materialism. Terrible if they were right. I love the world, every last atom of it. But if the world doesn't love your idea anymore, you and Rodionov will be second best. My name is also a military name, says Ignis Nielsen, and at least that way we're not prey anymore. The world's saddest screeching starts to sound from the transistor radio. Track number 2, Grave, by the vanished dodecaphonic composer Comte de Pérouse Mitresi. Goodbye, Sigismund. Goodbye, Ignis, says the Entroponaut, and closes the door of the airship behind him. Ignis is left alone on the roof of the hospital. Eneminkin ciela on surstila. Rather, it is sad there. The ghost still hums as the propellers start to spin through his cytoplasm. Slowly at first, but their blades move faster and faster. Sigismund Berg stands in front of the porthole with his hands on the levers. The levers rise from the gearboxes in the floor like two forked horns. The man turns on the transistor radar. He tunes the device to a hidden radio station, and a computer, half the size of the wall, calculates the ship's course based on its transmission. The signal comes from countless different points, a superposition constellation, 4,000 kilometers away. From the transistor radio, he hears the speech component at the vibration of the strings. The kitten-voiced girl repeats there, in an endless circle through all time, What for her, looking from Rodionov's trench, is one and the same. A simultaneous and immeasurably complex event. A perfect, closed system. Azimuth, Boreas, Sinus, Oriole, Laudanum, Ultra, Tricolor, Ellipse, Nadir, Ellipse, Gamut, Azimuth, Tricolor, Econ, Oriole, Nadir. The Entroponaut pulls the levers down and back. His eyes are red, and the airship takes off from the landing platform on the roof of the hospital. The propellers pull the pail into spirals. The blades sweep Ignis Nielsen apart. Two men wave in a snowstorm that flickers blue-red from flashing lights. They fall into the distance slowly as the platform of the floating station is left behind in a blizzard. Therese opens his eyes in the sky. He can't feel his legs. Everything spins, and the air ambulance's propellers flap around noisily. A man in a black suit stands over him, illuminated by the heart monitor screen. This man is the man from Internal Affairs. He is the Angel of Death. "I can't feel my legs," coughs Therese. "This is what happens when you open fire on the ICP." "You..." Therese tries to sit up, but his wrists are bound to the first aid frame. "How?" "Unfortunately, I cannot answer this question." "Konchalovsky..." The former agent sinks back into the frame. "I give you Ulrich, but Konchalovsky doesn't exist. How could you? Who would?" He starts to tear his right wrist from the cuff. "You're a drug addict, Machajek. That's why. People like you are always careless. How many years have you been doing this before that man had a heart attack?" 2, 5. The man from Internal Affairs starts to straighten up, but the cuff on Therese's wrist pops open, and the man's cannulated hand grabs him by the tie. "You..." Therese coughs in his face, his tie clenched in his fist. "You have to help me." His partner is already approaching with a gun, but the agent waves him back. "Wait. I found things in Vasa about one closed investigation. Derek Trentmuller is his name. He's killed children, 20 or more, and maybe Lund's children too. Please, let go." The fallen agent lets go of his tie and collapses. "I have a notebook. Everything is in there. Promise me. I wouldn't have run otherwise. You have to follow up on those." The Angel of Death stands over him and wipes the blood off his tie. The Kokyo scrambles around far below, looking for his notebook. "You could get a medal for this. A promotion for sure." The man from Internal Affairs turns his back on him, and his partner rushes over to tie Therese's hand back to the frame. "Please," comes his broken voice over the noise of the engine. Tie fluttering in the wind of the propellers, and the investigator looks at the city as he descends from the belly of the airship. "Leave it, Machajek. Derek Trentmuller has nothing to do with it. These disappearances have not been reported." A subtle shade of humanity runs through his voice. "That's the only beautiful thing about this story." In the foreground, the lights of the hospital's landing platform flash in the storm. In the background, the spiked throne of new skyscrapers rise out of the city's light. There, an oil billionaire watches as the tiny dot of light from the ambulance airship disappears into the wind on the other side of the Vera River. News thoughts cool before him. Rates drop, and Grodd goes to war. General mobilization starts tomorrow. There's not much left. Over 3,000 pieces of disappearance memorabilia are spread out behind the man. But now, Saryam Ambartsumyan considers this view to be the jewel of his collection. A magnetic post shipment, a glass display case that arrived from Vasa on the evening train, rests under his hand. It is empty.